No company hires a middle school dropout who's useless. The disdainful voice of manager Suzuki echoed in the interview room. With a smug expression, he threw the resume out the window. At that moment, the door quietly opened. "Where's my grandson?" "What?" 3 seconds later, manager Suzuki's position plunged into despair. With a single command from the chairman, the situation took a drastic turn. But this wasn't just about revenge. The truth behind the corruption exposed by my grandfather 10 years ago was coming back to light. A battle was about to begin for justice and to secure the company's future. Together with Moka Sato, a young entrepreneur in the making, the fight to carve out a new era had begun. My name is Haruki Hirata. I'm 32 this year. For the past 10 years, I've been a top salesperson at a major trading firm. The relentless days of running without a break since I joined the company ended with one call from my grandfather. Late at night, I got the news he had been rushed to the hospital. From that moment, the gears of my life began to spin out of control. When I rushed to the hospital, my once vibrant grandfather looked so small lying in the sterile, white hospital bed. The doctor explained that he needed emergency surgery for an aortic dissection. The cost of the procedure would easily exceed $100,000. While the doctor was explaining the surgery, my grandfather regained consciousness. "Haruki, you came." "Of course I did. You'll be fine in no time." "No, I'm old now. Spending such a fortune just to live longer would only burden everyone." His frail voice tore at my heart. To me, my grandfather was like a father. After losing my parents in an accident when I was young, he cared for me despite his busy work schedule. "Don't say that. Grandpa, you're my pride." "Haruki." Tears welled up in his eyes as he held my hand. That warmth brought back memories of us running together at a school sports event. Factoring in rehab costs after discharge, my savings weren't enough. I'd also have to start negotiations with the insurance company. I decided to quit my job and focus entirely on caring for my grandfather. Former colleagues of my grandfather offered financial help, but I refused them all. I couldn't tarnish the trust had built as a senior executive at a trading firm. The next day, when I informed my boss of my decision to resign, he tried to persuade me to stay. Balancing caregiving and work just wasn't realistic. So I made the call to leave, but solving the financial problem meant I needed to find a new, more flexible job. 2 weeks after resigning, I'd applied to countless companies. But whenever I disclosed my caregiving responsibilities, the interviewer's expressions soured. Even so, giving up wasn't an option. With my resume in hand, I headed to an interview at a major corporation. As I stepped into the elevator of the office building, a young woman rushed in. "Sorry." She hastily adjusted her hair, and I couldn't help but smile. "It's all good." "Thank you. Are you here for an interview?" "Yes. I'm starting today. I'm sure you'll do great." She flashed a bright smile and stepped out of the elevator first. That smile gave me a bit of courage. When I entered the interview room, a middle-aged man exuding an intimidating aura was seated there. His name was Yosuke Suzuki, the HR manager. As he skimmed through my resume, a deep wrinkle formed between his brows. "You quit your previous job to care for a family member. How naive. We can't use someone with such baggage." Without even listening to my full explanation, Manager Suzuki threw my resume out the window. "No company hires a middle school dropout who's useless. Get out of here. Please check the resume properly. I'm a college graduate." "Shut up. Get out." As I stood there speechless at his unreasonable attitude, the door behind me quietly opened. What's going on here? Where's my grandson? Chairman. The heavy voice made the blood drain from Manager Suzuki's face. The chairman scanned the room and stopped at the resumes scattered outside the window. Manager, that's quite a dramatic way to handle paperwork. Manager Suzuki's face turned ghostly pale. This was the moment when the wheels of fate began to turn. Later, summoned to the chairman's office, Manager Suzuki stood frozen, unable to comprehend the scene before him. The chairman's secretary was carefully gathering and organizing the scattered resumes. I stood in the corner of the room, having just finished my interview earlier. In waiting for an explanation, Manager Suzuki. My apologies. The candidate didn't meet the selection criteria, so. Oh, then please, enlighten me about these criteria. Unable to endure the chairman's piercing gaze, Manager Suzuki began to sweat and stammer out excuses. The candidate quit his previous job to care for a family member. No matter how good his sales record is, someone who makes such rash decisions isn't suited for the company. Rash, you say? That's quite the judgment. Are you saying one should prioritize work over a family member's life? Manager Suzuki lowered his gaze, visibly trembling. The chairman, looking over my resume on the desk, continued calmly. Haruki Hirata, it says here you were the top salesperson for 10 consecutive years at your previous company. Yes. And yet, you decided to resign to care for a family member. Do you not grasp the weight of such a decision, manager? Manager Suzuki was at a loss for words, greeting his head in silence. I nodded quietly at the chairman's words. Explain why you dismissed him as a middle school dropout without even checking his resume. That was. A knock echoed through the silent chairman's office. The door opened, and the young woman I had met in the elevator peeked in. Grandfather, sorry to keep you waiting. Mocha, you're late. Manager Suzuki's eyes widened in shock. It was the moment he realized she was the chairman's granddaughter. Apologies, I was caught up organizing some paperwork. Oh, isn't this the gentleman from earlier? I couldn't hide my surprise either, but she smiled warmly and greeted. Manager Suzuki, your attitude affects the company's reputation. Apologize. My sincerest apologies. After muttering a perfunctory apology, Manager Suzuki hastily left the chairman's office. His retreating figure seemed to radiate a mix of anger and humiliation. Hirata, let's redo the interview properly. Mocha, you'll join us. Yes, grandfather. I mean, chairman. The interview proceeded in a friendly atmosphere. I even received positive suggestions on balancing caregiving and work. However, this was just the beginning of a new challenge. A week after joining the company, I found myself face to face with Manager Suzuki again. In the HR meeting room, Manager Suzuki glared at me. A thick stack of documents lay on the desk. Given your caregiving situation, a sales position isn't feasible. I have a track record in sales, so just because the chairman made it possible for you to join doesn't mean you'll get special treatment. You'll start with general clerical duties. I was at a loss for words upon hearing about this unjust reassignment. But arguing here wasn't the right move. I understand. Starting tomorrow, you'll handle document organization in the accounting department. There's a mountain of files, so overtime is mandatory. With a sneer, Manager Suzuki left me speechless as I exited the meeting room. In the hallway, Mocha Sato was waiting with a concerned look. Hirata, are you okay? Yes, somehow. Manager Suzuki is clearly being petty. Should I tell grandfather? No, that's not necessary. Using the chairman's influence to resolve the issue, what I wanted. I wanted to prove myself through my own efforts. The work in the accounting department, as Suzuki had said, was grueling. Days were spent organizing an endless pile of documents, often followed by late-night overtime. After overtime, I'd head straight to the hospital to visit my grandfather. Amid this tough routine, I noticed something unusual. There were inconsistencies in past expense reports. Specifically, projects involving manager Suzuki showed irregular expenditures. One night, while heading to the hospital after overtime, I overheard a familiar voice coming from a beer hall near the station. "That old man Hirata, is he still alive?" Drunken laughter spilled out into the street. I stopped in my tracks and listened closely. I haven't forgotten how he cornered me 10 years ago. This time, he'll crush his grandson. While the subordinates seated with him exchanged uneasy glances, Manager Suzuki downed his beer with a smirk. The next day, Moka Sato called me to the company rooftop. With a serious expression, she began, "Hirata, I've been looking into something and found out a few things." "What is it?" 10 years ago, Manager Suzuki was involved in fraudulent accounting at another company, and the accounting director at the time was. "No way." "Yes, it was your grandfather." I gasped. My grandfather's final act as a senior executive was to expose corruption. The accounting director at the time was none other than Manager Suzuki. Not only that, but it seems Manager Suzuki falsified his resume to get hired here. Grandfather has already started investigating this. This situation was spiraling in an unexpected direction. Manager Suzuki's relentless harassment wasn't mere pettiness. It was deliberate retaliation. "Sato, leave this to me." "But this involves my grandfather as well. I want to see it through properly." Moka Sato looked at me for a moment and then nodded slightly. "Understood. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know." From that day forward, a new battle began. My confrontation with Manager Suzuki carried an unexpected connection from the past. Every day in the accounting department was a fight against a mountain of documents. The workload assigned by Manager Suzuki kept growing endlessly. But the evidence of fraud I uncovered during this work was steadily piling up. As I finished my tasks and prepared to head to the hospital, Moka Sato approached me. "Hirata, are you leaving for the day?" "Yes, I have to visit the hospital." "Would it be okay if I joined you?" Her offer left me puzzled. Despite being the chairman's granddaughter, why was she getting so involved? "I wouldn't want to trouble you, Sato. My grandfather told me about your grandfather, and also about what happened at your previous company." Her sincere voice echoed down the hallway in the twilight. "Actually, I interned at your grandfather's company when I was a student." "What?" "He was strict, but he always looked out for us with such warm eyes. That's why I want to help." Those words suddenly made everything clear. Her reluctance to discuss my grandfather, her demeanor toward me, it all connected. "I see. And am also concerned about Manager Suzuki. Let me help investigate the accounting department's documents." I couldn't think of a reason to refuse. If anything, her support was reassuring. On the train to the hospital, Moka shared her memories from her student days. The business philosophy and values my grandfather taught her. It all resonated with the reasons he fought against corruption 10 years ago. "Your grandfather always said, the essence of good management is valuing people." When we arrived at the hospital, my grandfather was sleeping peacefully. His recovery after surgery was progressing well, and rehab was going smoothly. "Take care." "Thank you." As we left the hospital room, Moka greeted deeply. Her gesture reflected her respect and gratitude toward my grandfather. From the next day, Mocha began using her break times to help with the accounting department's investigation. Her presence became a source of support when I felt overwhelmed by the pressure. One lunchtime, while we ate on the rooftop, she asked curiously, "Hirata, why did you decide to quit your job for caregiving? Surely there were other options." "My grandfather is the one who raised me. After losing my parents, he worked tirelessly while taking care of me. Now it's my turn to repay him." "But I heard you declined offers of financial help. Accepting those would have hurt his pride." "That's admirable." Her words left me momentarily speechless. She smiled softly, gazing up at the sky. "Actually, my grandfather raised me too. My parents worked abroad, so I rarely saw them. That's why I understand how you feel." Finding this common ground, we began to share lunch on the rooftop more often. We talked about work, family, and dreams for the future. These casual conversations helped soothe my weary soul. But not everyone found our relationship amusing. Manager Suzuki glared at the two of us with a stern expression. One day, when Mocha Sato came to the accounting department to retrieve some documents, he spoke up. "Sato, as the chairman's granddaughter, you think it's inappropriate to be so close with a regular employee. That's for me to decide. It reflects on the company's reputation. You should associate with people of more appropriate standing." "Standing, a company doesn't need such distinctions. I'm sure grandfather feels the same way." Her firm response left Manager Suzuki speechless. However, a dangerous glint appeared in his eyes. Not long after, an incident occurred in which accounting department records were altered. Suspicion quickly fell on me, as I had been frequently reviewing the documents. "Hirata, there's suspicion surrounding you. Don't let getting close to the chairman's granddaughter go to your head. Do you have any proof? There's going to be a special investigation soon. I hope you can prove your innocence." Manager Suzuki smirked meaningfully. But I had already anticipated his scheme. Mocha and I had been methodically gathering solid evidence. "Hirata, don't worry. We have things to protect too." Nodding at her words, I resolved to wait for the moment of confrontation. All of this was to uphold the values my grandfather had fought for. Days passed since the accusation of tampering with the documents. To counter Manager Suzuki's ploys, Mocha and I carefully collected evidence. Every lunch break, we held meetings on the rooftop, sharing our findings daily. One day, during lunch, Mocha burst onto the rooftop, looking excited. "Hirata, I found something important." The document she handed me detailed the fraudulent accounting practices from 10 years ago. The papers, signed by Manager Suzuki, revealed the full extent of the fraud my grandfather had exposed. This is definitely evidence. But it's not enough. We need proof that Manager Suzuki is still committing fraud. "You're right. Let's proceed cautiously." As we discussed, the spring breeze gently swept around us. Cherry blossoms danced in the air, and one petal landed on Mocha's shoulder. "Oh, Hirata, there's a petal. Spring's here already." Instinctively, I reached out and brushed the petal away. At that moment, our eyes met, and a brief silence hung between us. Hirata, are you free this Saturday?" "Saturday. I'd like to accompany you to your grandfather's hospital, and, if possible." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Could we have a meal together afterward?" Her sudden invitation caught me off guard, but her sincere gaze left me with no reason to refuse. On Saturday, after chatting with my grandfather at the hospital, we headed to a nearby restaurant. Mocha fondly shared memories from her student days. During my internship, your grandfather was strict with me, but that experience has been so valuable now. Grandfather's guidance was certainly tough. Yes, but within that toughness was warmth. I think that teaching is crucial even in running a company today. After our meal, we strolled through a park. This spring warmth had drawn out many families, enjoying their time together. Hirata, I've made a decision. What is it? I want to make this company better, carrying on my grandfather's vision. That's why I chose to work as a regular employee, to learn from the ground up. Her eyes burned with determination. In her resolve, I saw my own aspirations reflected. At the start of the week, Mocha Sato brought a new discovery. She had found a suspicious contract with one of the clients tied to manager Suzuki. It was evidence pointing to ongoing fraud. This could be it. Yes, but we still need. In the middle of our conversation, manager Suzuki appeared on the rooftop. He stared at us coldly. You two seem awfully close. Does the chairman know about this? I've already spoken to grandfather. Is that so? Well, both your relationship and this investigation will soon come to an end. With those cryptic words, he walked away, his back emanating hostility. Hirata, we've come too far to back down now. Yes, we'll uncover the truth to the very end. That evening, Mocha accompanied me to the hospital. In my grandfather's room, she spoke gently. Grandfather, you'll get better soon. We'll make sure of it. You've grown so much. With a warm smile, my grandfather took her hand. Haruki, take care of her. Grandpa. As we left the hospital, a small tear glistened on Mocha's cheek. We walked home in silence, carrying unspoken feelings in our hearts. We had no way of knowing then that this quiet moment would be the calm before a storm. Our effort to expose manager Suzuki's fraud was making steady progress. Spending more time with Mocha only fueled my drive to work harder. One day, under the early summer sunlight streaming into the office, Mocha came running toward me with a document in hand. Hirata, look at this contract. The payment amount to the client is significantly higher than the actual transaction amount. There's evidence of inflated billing here too. As we pored over the accounting records, manager Suzuki's methods became clearer. He had set up fictitious clients, inflated invoices, and pocketed the difference, a sophisticated scheme. There's something that bothers me. Manager Suzuki was caught for fraud and dismissed 10 years ago. How did he even get into this company? I've looked into that. I showed her a document. It was a falsified resume for manager Suzuki, with his entire employment history rewritten. He lied about his background to get hired. Then, as HR manager, he used his position to cover up his past. As we reviewed the documents, the lunch bell rang. Shall we have lunch outside today? There's a new cafe I'd like to try. The cafe Mocha chose had a calm and inviting atmosphere. Hirata, how are you handling your grandfather's surgery expenses? Insurance will cover most of it. The rest will come from my savings. I think the company's benefits program could help reduce your burden further. Would you like me to look into it? You'd go that far for me. Please let me do what I can for you and your grandfather, Hirata. Her sincere gaze left me without words to refuse. On our way back to the office after lunch, a light drizzle began to fall. We shared the umbrella Mocha had brought. Hirata, about tomorrow's day off. Yes. My grandfather, the chairman, has invited me to lunch, and he wondered if you could join us too. I hesitated at the sudden invitation, but Mocha's hopeful expression left me no choice but to accept. The next day, our meal with the chairman began at a Japanese restaurant he had chosen. "Hirata, how's the work in the accounting department?" "I'm learning a lot, sir. I'm aware of the situation with Manager Suzuki. I've also heard about your investigation's progress." "Grandfather, to think it's the same scheme your grandfather dealt with. This time, we must secure irrefutable evidence." Mocha and I exchanged surprised looks at the chairman's words. "Your grandfather and I have been old friends. His teachings still guide my management principles today." Hearing this ignited a new sense of purpose within me. This wasn't just about exposing fraud. It was about protecting the values my grandfather and the chairman had built together. After the meal, Mocha and I strolled through the city. The sky at dusk was painted in soft hues. "Hirata, I have something I want to protect too. I want to make this company a better place." "I feel the same. Let's work hard together." Her words carried unwavering determination. Together, we were stepping into a new phase. But soon, the situation took an unexpected turn. Manager Suzuki made his move. On Monday, it was discovered that critical documents from the accounting department had been taken. At the same time, harassment targeting Mocha began. Manager Suzuki's schemes ran deeper than we had anticipated. Yet our bond only grew stronger. This was, after all, a fight for justice. The day after the documents were taken, we made our next move. Mocha consulted the chairman and successfully secured backup data. Signs of Manager Suzuki's desperation began to show. During a rare sunny break in the rainy season, I received a call from Mocha. She wanted to meet near my grandfather's hospital to discuss something important. When I arrived at the meeting spot, she held a small envelope in her hands. "Hirata, take a look at this." Inside was an old photograph. It was a snapshot from a New Year's party at my grandfather's company 10 years ago. In it were a young Manager Suzuki, my grandfather, and the chairman. I found it in grandfather's study. Back then, the three of them had a relationship built on trust. In the photo, Manager Suzuki wore a proud expression, a refreshing smile that was worlds apart from his current stern demeanor. My grandfather told me, Manager Suzuki was once an exceptionally talented person. But when the company faced tough times, he resorted to fraud. I see, but it seems his intent was to protect the company and its employees, even if he chose the wrong method. After visiting my grandfather in his hospital room, Mocha and I stood on the rooftop. The sunset painted the cityscape a deep red. "Hirata, is simply cornering Manager Suzuki enough?" "What do you mean?" "Can we give him a chance to reform? Maybe, like before, he could find his way back to the right path." Her words made me think deeply. She was right. Punishment alone might not be the solution. "Understood. Let's try arranging an opportunity to talk." "Thank you." The next day, Mocha set up a meeting with Manager Suzuki. The three of us sat across from each other in the conference room. "What do you want?" "Manager Suzuki, please look at this photo." The moment he saw the photograph from 10 years ago, his expression shifted. "Why do you have this? You were an admirable leader back then. It's not too late to change." "Shut up. You don't understand anything." Though he lashed out, there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. "For the sake of the company and its employees, please come back to us." After saying this, we left the room. From that day forward, subtle changes began to show in Manager Suzuki's behavior. However, That weekend, my grandfather's condition suddenly worsened. When I rushed to the hospital, Mocha was already there. "Hirata, don't worry, he's stable now." According to the doctor, it was a temporary episode. I sighed in relief as my grandfather opened his eyes. "Haruki, Mocha, I'm sorry for worrying you." "Grandfather, take care of yourself." "Grandpa, just rest for now." After this incident, Mocha made it a routine to accompany me to the hospital. Her presence became a source of support for both me and my grandfather. Then, on a scorching summer day, Manager Suzuki approached us with an unexpected proposal. He'll admit to all the fraud, and he'll resign voluntarily. "Manager Suzuki, you two young people have taught me the importance of living honestly." This decision marked the beginning of a new path. However, it wasn't the end. It was the start of the real battle. About a week after Manager Suzuki announced his resignation, the company saw new developments. Tension ran high in the office that morning. Rumors spread that a new HR manager was taking over. Before the workday began, Mocha rushed over to me in the lobby. "Hirata, this is big. The new HR manager." At that moment, the elevator doors opened, and a man stepped out. In his late 50s, with a stern expression, he walked directly toward us. "You must be Haruki Hirata, the new HR manager, Seiichi Takahashi." There was a coldness in his eyes, different from Suzuki's. Takahashi looked around at the surrounding employees with an intimidating gaze before turning back to me. "I've heard about your situation. Even if the previous manager had issues, hiring you as a general employee was clearly a mistake." The sudden declaration sent murmurs rippling through the office. The morning calm was instantly replaced with tension. "Effective today, you're being transferred to the sales department. But there's a condition." "What condition?" "Deliver results within 3 months, or you're fired on the spot." Mocha Sato began to protest, but Manager Takahashi raised his hand to silence her. Perhaps the chairman's granddaughter should stop playing around in the field. A heavy atmosphere hung in the corridor. Takahashi smirked in satisfaction before striding away confidently. During lunch that day, Mocha returned from the chairman's office. Her expression tense. "I found out that Takahashi is the son of one of grandfather's old friends. He's known for his aggressive tactics, but his skills are apparently undeniable." "I see. But, Hirata, something doesn't add up. There's a conspicuous gap in his work history." "Takahashi too." At that moment, Takahashi suddenly appeared. He must have overheard our conversation, as his expression was sharp and severe. "Sato, it seems you're curious about my background." "No, I was just—" "Let me warn you. It's best not to pry where you don't belong. Your position isn't entirely secure, either." His words carried a clear threat. Leaving a cold glare behind, he walked away. The situation quickly deteriorated after that. Takahashi claimed he was thoroughly investigating the materials left by former manager Suzuki and seized all documents from the accounting department. Among them were the pieces of evidence Mocha and I had painstakingly gathered. Later, while we were strategizing in a meeting room, we received an email. The sender was anonymous, but the contents were shocking. "This is a record of Takahashi's past." Attached to the email was evidence of Takahashi committing fraud at a different company in the past. Though the sender's identity was hidden, the tone made it clear it was Suzuki. "This is from Suzuki, isn't it? Why would he send something like this?" The answer came unexpectedly. The next day when Takahashi visited me, "Hirata, I heard your grandfather's surgery was a success. Yes, but rehabilitation will take time and a lot of money. His cryptic words sent a chill down my spine. You know, there's a company program. If you choose early retirement, you'll receive a substantial payout. As I tried to decipher his intent, he continued, of course, if you voluntarily resign, you won't have to worry about your grandfather's medical expenses. Is that a threat? No, it's a deal. Leave the company, and your grandfather's life is secured. What do you say? As he finished, Mocha entered the room holding documents. Takahashi gave a sly smile and left. Your Honor, that conversation just now. Yes, you heard it. They'll talk to grandfather. Takahashi's behavior is clearly suspicious. However, meeting with the chairman proved difficult. Takahashi had started obstructing our efforts. Sudden critical negotiations and emergency meetings were scheduled, making it nearly impossible to approach the chairman. One night, on my way to the hospital after finishing overtime, a stranger called out to me. Hirata, I need to talk to you. It was former manager Suzuki, now sporting a beard and wearing casual clothes. His appearance had changed so drastically that I hardly recognized him. I know who Takahashi really is. 10 years ago, he was an accomplice in the fraud your grandfather exposed. What? I made mistakes, yes, but I've been trying to atone and turn my life around. Takahashi hasn't. He's still doing the same things. Under the street light, Suzuki handed me critical evidence. This is my way of making amends. You and Sato are the only ones who can stop Takahashi. As he walked away, his retreating figure reminded me of the proud man he once was. This situation took an unexpected turn. The next day, Takahashi suddenly announced a massive personnel reshuffle. Among the changes was Mocha's transfer to a rural branch, a clear act of retaliation. Takahashi had cunningly used the chairman's influence to implement his plans. But he overlooked one critical factor: the bond between my grandfather and the chairman, and the strength of our determination. The day after Takahashi's personnel announcement, the office was in an uproar. Mocha's transfer was clearly an act of vindictive harassment. Early in the morning, an unexpected visitor arrived. Former manager Suzuki. He approached me with a tense expression. Hirata, there's no time. You know Takahashi's next move, don't you? Yes, he's isolating Mocha and tightening the net around me. And next, he'll target the chairman, just like he did 10 years ago. Our voices echoed in the otherwise silent hallway. Suzuki pulled out an old notebook. This is evidence from 10 years ago. Takahashi not only framed me but also drove many others into corners. The notebook contained meticulous records, illicit fund flows, falsified contracts, and testimonies from those involved. It all pointed to Takahashi's crimes. Why wasn't this evidence used before? Because I had to admit to my own guilt first, but things are different now. Suddenly, the ding of the arriving elevator startled us. Suzuki quickly disappeared. When the doors opened, Takahashi stepped out. My, you're in early today, Hirata? Yes, just getting a head start on work. I see. Too bad about Sato's transfer. But then, you won't be around much longer either. Leaving those cutting remarks, Takahashi strode off, exuding the confidence of someone who believed victory was already in his grasp. At lunchtime, I met Mocha at the hospital, where she shared new revelations. Hirata, I've reviewed all the materials from 10 years ago. Takahashi didn't just set Suzuki up. He also targeted your grandfather's health. What do you mean? Back then, The stress that caused your grandfather to collapse. It was deliberately orchestrated by Takahashi. Looking at my grandfather quietly resting in his hospital room, a fresh wave of anger surged within me. Takahashi wasn't just guilty of fraud, he had played with human lives. But how can we fight back? We have to meet with the chairman. But Takahashi has stationed his men everywhere. Down the hallway, Takahashi's subordinates were already positioned, ensuring the chairman remained completely out of reach. At that moment, my grandfather opened his eyes. "Haruki, Mocha, I have a message for Daisuke." "Grandpa? Don't push yourself. It'll be fine. The man who tried to take my life must be stopped this time." With trembling hands, he handed over an old photograph. In it were the chairman and my grandfather in their youth, along with Takahashi in the corner. This is where it all began. Mocha quickly took a picture of the photo with her smartphone and emailed it to the chairman. This small step would set everything into motion. The next day, Takahashi's pressure tactics intensified further. "Hirata, it seems your sales performance is lackluster. At this rate, you won't meet the deadline." "I haven't given up yet." "Is that so? I've already lined up meetings with clients. Your replacement is ready." Through the conference room window, the evening sky glowed with fading light. Time was slipping away. "Hirata, I've found something new." Mocha held out the analysis of the documents entrusted to us by former manager Suzuki. "Takahashi's fraud is far more severe than we imagined. He's involved in money laundering across multiple companies, fictitious transactions, and pressuring partner companies. Yes, and the evidence is disappearing one by one." This situation was worse than we had thought. Takahashi wasn't just committing fraud, he was orchestrating a systemic crime operation, far beyond the scope of a single company's issues. "Shouldn't we call the police?" "Not yet. We need airtight evidence first." At that moment, an urgent call came from the chairman. "Mocha, in beginning to see the truth behind what happened 10 years ago, Takahashi's father was a dear friend of mine. Grandfather. He was an honest and respectable leader, but Takahashi wasn't. He exploited his father's trust to carry out fraud after fraud." Suddenly, the call was cut off. Mocha hurried to the chairman's office, where Takahashi was standing. "So, you've come this far. Where is grandfather?" "Don't worry, he just felt unwell. I've called a doctor." The chairman was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. The diagnosis was overwork and mild dehydration. However, this incident was a clear warning. "Hirata, we can't wait any longer. Takahashi even targeted grandfather." "I know. Let's act now." We began organizing all the evidence we had prepared. Suzuka's testimony, the records from 10 years ago, and the proof of Takahashi's ongoing crimes. That night, my grandfather and the chairman reunited at the hospital. "Daisuke, it's been a while." "Yeah, you're still as lively as ever." "This time, we must settle things with that father and son." "Yes, let's leave it to the younger ones." The next day was Mocha's transfer day. Takahashi smirked as he addressed her. "Sato, I look forward to seeing your success in the rural office." But his smile didn't last long. An emergency alarm rang through the building, announcing an urgent board meeting. The boardroom was filled with executives wearing tense expressions. Suddenly, former manager Suzuki entered the room. "Takahashi, I'm going to reveal everything." "What are you? You were ordered to stay silent." "It's time to end this. My crimes, your crimes, everything must be brought to light." Mocha and I began presenting the evidence we had meticulously prepared, piece by piece. The full scope of Takahashi's fraud gradually became clear. Wait, this is all fabricated. I didn't. That's enough. The chairman entered the room calmly, flanked by police officers. Chairman, no, it can't be. Your father was my dear friend. To see his son fall to such depths is heartbreaking. It was the beginning of the end. Takahashi's crimes were fully exposed, and he was arrested on the spot. However, this wasn't the conclusion. It was the start of a new journey to guide the company in the right direction. 2 weeks after Takahashi's arrest, the company was at a major turning point. The morning sunlight streamed into the office, bringing a fresh sense of renewal. Following the emergency board meeting, it was decided to overhaul the company's structure entirely. The outdated systems that had allowed corruption to fester would be replaced, and a focus on promoting younger leadership was set as the new direction. On the day of the announcement of the new management structure, Chairman Sato addressed me in his office with a gentle smile. Hirata, I want you to take charge of the sales department moving forward. I was stunned by the unexpected decision. The chairman continued. Your grandfather taught me something important. Never judge a person by their resume, but by their actions. That my grandfather's teachings would bear fruit in this way was beyond anything I'd imagined. But the chairman wasn't finished. One more thing. I have an important request. Take care of Mocha. What? Grandfather. Mocha blushed deeply, and the chairman smiled warmly. With you two letting, in confident this company will head in the right direction. As we left the chairman's office, Mocha and I walked down the hallway in awkward silence. The air between us felt thick with unspoken words. Hirata, Mocha, actually. We spoke at the same time, then hesitated again. Just then, a familiar voice broke the silence. Entrusting the future to you two, what an excellent decision. We turned to see former manager Suzuki, now clean-shaven and standing tall. In starting a new path, I've handed over all the evidence and taken full responsibility for my crimes. From now on, we'll work at a law firm, fighting against corruption. Suzuki? Seeing you two reminded me of something, the importance of living honestly. His words carried a renewed sense of dignity. The next day, my grandfather was discharged from the hospital. As we packed his belongings, an unexpected visitor arrived. Koichi, how about a beer for old time's sake? I do like that. The two old friends began chatting and reminiscing about their younger days. Do you remember, back in the day, when you fought against corruption? I was quite reckless back then. But those lessons are now being carried forward by the younger generation. You're talking about Haruki and the young lady. Yes, it's a curious connection, isn't it? Outside the window, cherry blossoms danced in the air, heralding the arrival of spring. Meanwhile, manager Takahashi's downfall was a tragic one. After his fraud was exposed, he faced multiple lawsuits from various companies, losing all his personal assets. This scale of his crimes, revealed during police investigations, was beyond imagination. Takahashi had exploited his father's trust, using elaborate schemes to embezzle money over the years. The total amount exceeded several million USD. Some companies were even forced into bankruptcy because of him. A month after the new management structure was implemented, the company began to regain its vitality. A new proposal system for younger employees was introduced, leading to a steady stream of fresh ideas. Mocha Sato dedicated herself to creating a more employee-friendly environment in the HR department. She worked tirelessly to reform systems, including support for work-life balance, expanded caregiving leave, and other initiatives to support employees. In the sales department, I focused on rebuilding trust with clients. One by one, I worked to mend the relationships damaged by Takahashi's fraud. One evening, as the sun set, I met Mocha again on the rooftop. "Hirata, do you remember the first time we met?" "Yes, in the elevator. That day, I was drawn to your sincerity." Her profile, illuminated by the sunset, left me momentarily speechless. Grandfather probably knew from the very beginning. He must have seen that you... Mocha. "Yes. Will you marry me?" Her eyes widened at the unexpected proposal. Then, she nodded softly. "Yes." A new chapter of our lives was about to begin. The following day, a celebratory gathering was held. My grandfather and the chairman watched over us with warm smiles. "Haruki, the real challenge starts now. Take good care of her." From afar, former manager Suzuki also celebrated our new beginning. Having embarked on a new path, he was now fighting corporate fraud in the courtroom. The company itself was steadily transforming. The old ways were gradually being eradicated, and the organization was evolving into one that respected the voices of the younger generation. The belief in people-centered management, a principle my grandfather upheld throughout his life, was being passed on to the next generation. This was the dawn of a new era. Justice always prevails. The collective efforts of everyone who fought for this belief had finally borne fruit.